It's time to get inside the Giants Huddle.
Let's go, let's go, let's go.
On Giants.com.
I like it.
And the Giants mobile app.
Boom, give me some juice.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's roll.
Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle Podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. I'm John Schmeelk. Well, folks, we're back with our normal Friday player interview and game preview podcast. It'll be the same every week. We'll talk to a member of the Giants. We'll talk to head coach Brian Daboll. And we'll talk to a beat reporter covering the opposing team. But as always, why don't we start off with Adoree Jackson, who was a big matchup with CeeDee Lamb this week. He'll also talk about the Giants' young cornerbacks and the matchup against the Dallas Cowboys, not to mention some big picture stuff with the Giants. And now we're joined by the vet in the Giants DB room, Adoree Jackson. Adoree, how are you, man?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm doing great, dude. All right, so let's start here. You've been around good teams in your career. You've been around teams that have gone far in the playoffs. You've been teams that haven't gone so far in the playoffs.
Correct.
What's your feel for this team coming out of camp, given what you know about what NFL teams should look like when you're starting a season?
I think for us being very competitive and being able to just be another year on this system, I think that's always a plus. And it's a pleasure to have another year. And then the guys that we bring in, you always know that this league is not going to be the same. Everything changes. But to have those who come and come in this league and come in this system, understanding what we're trying to build and where we want to go. And I think we're doing a good job at that, and I'm excited for our future.
What's different when you get to regular season game one, right? You've done scrimmages against the Lions. You've done preseason games. You've done a bunch of practices. But obviously something is very different when you play that first regular season game. So what is a player, is it almost hard to prepare for in the preseason that happens in game one that you just kind of got to say, oh, yeah, this is what this is like, and you kind of got to hit the ground running a little bit?
I think the preseason gives you a good tell of how the season may be. You know, people say that the game ramps up a bit, but I think if you go into practice and handle it the right way, the level of play shouldn't change. So you need to go out there and practice, exalt yourself, and conditioning, running to the ball, working your technique, playing hard, and doing things that's going to stress you. So when you get to the game, you've been in those positions, you've seen those looks, so you're not doing it for the first time. So I think that's the difference for some. Just go out there and whatever you do in practice, translate that into the game.
What is it about the way Wink and Dabes coaches you guys that does allow you to play with that level of intensity throughout the summer and August?
I think Wink does a great job of letting us be ourselves. He lets the defense be our defense, although he has a history of having great defenses, being number one, winning Super Bowls. But I like that he keeps it real with us, have those conversations, where we can improve on. He never tell someone if you're good. I mean, you know that, but you always tell someone, even if you're good, what you can work on and improve. And I
Sure.
love that, the most. He's not going to toot your horn, but he's also going to let you know it's always areas to improve on and be better. And I think him doing that and then bringing the right guys and us being another year in this system, we're able to hold each other accountable so you don't take it the wrong way. It's like an older brother or cousin, whatever it may be, telling you, hey, you need to tighten up, get it together. And you're like, okay, you take it the right way, understand, like, I don't want to disappoint my brothers, the guy next to me. And I think holding each other accountable, being under this defense again, and being comfortable makes a lot of difference.
You mentioned the keep it real sessions. Obviously, it's easier to have those conversations one-on-one with the coach, right? But my understanding is that he does everybody in the room in front of the group, right?
Exactly.
Why does that work? Because I feel like for some guys that might be something they don't like so much, having that aired publicly in front of the entire defense.
I think it works because you're all on the same page. You understand now, where you're seeing at, where you looked at, and you can actually be with your peers. And you can't go in the locker room and say, oh, man, I'm not feeling this, I'm not feeling that. But at the same time, when you have those keep it real, Wink lets you know, speak up now so we're all on the same page. It's kind of like, being at the family table and they say, how was your day? Everybody get their chance to talk. And I like that a lot, to be able to have that family dynamic and all be on the same page.
Where do you think specifically this defense can make the biggest improvement from last year to this year?
I think the biggest improvement for us is to when adversity hits. I mean, obviously, we went 77-2. I was about to say 72. We went 7-2, and then we lose a couple games here and there. But then we won that one game and get to the playoffs. But I think from that standpoint, understanding that feeling, you know what I'm saying? I think that's where you can improve at, knowing that feeling of losing streaks, that feeling of losing in the playoffs, that feeling of things not going your way. And I think you put all those sweat and tears and blood that you shed during OTAs, during camp, and I think you get that understanding and everybody be on the same page. I think that's the improvement there, just going into week one and just sacrificing everything that you put on the line that night.
We talked on the Giants Huddle podcast back in June at the end of minicamp.
Right.
And I asked you about Deontay, I asked you about Trey. And you talked about their maturity. They're a little bit different. Once you got to see them on the field in camp, pads, contact, what more did you see, and where do you think they've kind of improved a lot as you've seen them over the past 6, 7, 8 weeks?
I think where I've seen them improve at the most would be just, I won't say understanding the game. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because you get to play with us, you get to understand. They ask a lot of questions, and I love that a lot. And just to be able to ask and to learn and seek knowledge and to seek how to be better, how to play certain things. So I appreciate that a lot, about those two. And I think that's where I see the most improvement, like understanding football. And even when we're out there just discussing different things, anticipating, asking questions. What do you think going to happen here? Why you think that? And even when we're in there with Rom, he asks, a bunch of questions. Why? What's your thought process on this? Let me know. I'm going to tell you what I would think. And then he asks us, how do you think? Or what would you think? And I think them learning every day and wanting to learn and wanting to get better is helpful.
Now, I'm sure you've seen a bunch of rookies that have come to teams you've been on be very physically gifted, and then they get on the field, and it's like, all right, you might be physically gifted, but you're not ready to play, right? So what sets, and maybe you already answered this question talking about all the questions they ask and understanding the game, but what makes Trey and Deontay different, that they are ready to play, and you and Wink and their teammates and Coach Daboll can have confidence in them at such a young age with no NFL experience?
I think it goes with, I don't want to say being battle tested, but seeing them in camp, the joint practice, you've seen them in the preseason games, how they approach the game. They approach the game the right way. They respect it, and I think when you respect the game and do things the right way, good things happen to those. So from that standpoint, they take care of their bodies. They're in the classroom wanting to learn, asking questions, watching them work their technique, and if, leading by example to say, if I don't do a rep right, I'm going to do it again. And I see them doing it again. Like, if they didn't like it, they're going to do it again. So I see them just trying to, let me just do it like a pro and be a pro, and they do a great job at that.
And this is not to minimize the work they've done, but how does Wink and the way he understands how to use players to their strengths and what they're good at help young guys like that maybe come along a little quicker because he knows how to use his system and play to their strengths a little bit? I
think that's helpful a lot. And having like I said, the accountability from your peers around you, and those keeper reels. So he's not going to always tell you what you do good. He's going to tell you what you can improve at. So you're going to see those keeper reels, and then your peers next to you, like, okay, let's see if he's going to improve. Let's see if he's going to get better and do better. So I think that's helpful a lot. It's like, pressure is good, I feel like. That means something is expected of you. So when you have Wink, us, and everybody around you expecting you to do great things and hold you accountable, and they can hold us accountable as well. So that's what I appreciate the most about it. Is not one-sided. Like, if you're not playing good or you're not doing something, I would expect them to pick the next man up, because at the end of the day, you want them to do the same for you.
All right, let's talk about you. We haven't talked about you yet. You've asked a million times, are you comfortable playing in the slot? Are you ready to do it? I'm not going to answer that because you've answered it a million times. Because you have done it before. It's not like you played, I think, 60 or 70 snaps there last year, and you followed receivers there. Mm-hmm. You've done it. So what different technique things have you had to work on now in the past 6 weeks or so when you learn that, maybe this is going to be a bigger part of what I do? What are some of the things you've had to work in practice so you are ready to go out there if you're playing more snaps than you have in the past on a game-by-game basis inside?
I really just talked to Darnay a lot and Cordell Flott, but being able to have them on the sideline, talk to them, ask them questions like, if I do something, I explain why I did it this way, and I ask them, just like how Rome asked the DBs, why did you see it that way? So I always ask questions like, why did you do it this way? Or I did it like this. What could I have done to be better? Sometimes they'd be like, oh, no, that was good like that. Or they'd be like, oh, try this out. So I think that's very helpful, being on the same page and understanding. And that's what I love about this room. It's always trying to each one teach one, help each other be better. Like I said, you don't have to be well, you can be older and not know everything and still learn. And I appreciate, that a lot, for these guys helping me out. And at the same time, it's iron sharpens iron. So
Sure.
I'll go out there and try to do something. And it's like, okay, let's see if he can do better than that. And then he do it like, okay, now I got to make a play. So I love this about this group. We're always trying to push each other and compete and see who can be, the best DB on the practice field.
And I guess the three things that are a little bit different is maybe a little bit more setting the edge in the run game, right? Because you're closer to the line. That's one.
Right.
Two-way go in coverage. You don't have that sideline there to use to kind of help you out outside.
Right.
But then you get the blitz more too, right?
Right.
I imagine. So you're already smart. I know you're looking forward to
Yeah.
that. So what of those three things, what kind of is the biggest challenge? What has you most excited is maybe some of the different things you have to do inside as opposed to playing near the boundary?
I think everything is very exciting for me in that sense, just to display not just my athleticism, but my knowledge and understanding of the game. In a sense,
You mentioned you felt like Logan Ryan, right? And he was like the ultimate, guy that plays with his head, right?
Yeah. Man, Logan is a tremendous talent. And like you said, his mental, the game is 90% mental, 10 physical. And you can see it out there with Logan. Smart guy, plays the game in the right way and approaches the right way, studies. And, being under his wing for, I was 3 years at 4 years in Tennessee. And then one year here, so it's like, okay, you get to understand. It's like you get to follow those footsteps and see. You might not ask a bunch of questions, but from afar, I'm paying attention. Like, okay, he does like this, he do it like that, and I might ask here and there and see what he says. But he's like, okay, he doing his thing. So I think that's what's very exciting. I've seen the success, Logan has, and how he made a difference, regardless, and how he was being outside corner. And when I got there, they moved him to the slot, but he's still playing outside, and seeing him do both at a high level, it's like, okay, I can respect that, I can appreciate that. I see that if I get that position, I want to emulate, how Logan Ryan did. And then, you just watch, other guys who've been in the slot, like Tyrann Mathieu, when he's at LSU or in the league playing, and I think those are helpful. And Marlon Humphrey as well, being in that system with Wink, get to see different things.
Hey, you get to follow guys now more, right? I mean, if you want to follow a guy, they go inside, and you'd be like, all right, I'm good now.
Right now, they don't know what we're playing. Man zone, I don't know. So yeah, that's another cool point about being inside in the slot and having I followed the receivers before last year, so you don't know what may happen in the game. And I think I appreciate the most about this opportunity to be able to display different things and just have fun with my guys out there.
Couple questions about the matchup. We got to get you to your meeting. CeeDee Lamb, what makes him a tough matchup as a wide receiver? He led the league in yards receiving from the slot last year. What makes him tough to cover?
Besides being a tremendous athlete, great ball skills, I think him and his quarterback on the same rapport. Whether it be, all right, regardless, I'm gonna throw you the ball because I like you. You're my favorite target, so I'm gonna make sure I feed you that ball.
You're gonna get action now.
You get a bunch of targets, and that's one of the things you will want as a receiver, and he thrives, well in his role and the things that he do.
Were you in Tennessee when Brandon Cooks was in Houston? I should have looked this up before we started.
When I was in Tennessee, Brandon Cooks was in New England. My rookie year, he was in New England.
So he was gone from Houston by the time you were in Tennessee.
Yeah, I played him once. He got to Houston my last year in Tennessee.
Okay.
So this was 2021 or
20, right?
20 COVID year, and then I came here. He was still in Houston when we played last year, but I faced him a couple times because he was with the Rams. I know I faced him in a playoff game when he was in New England. With the Rams.
What have you told the Young Bucks about him? Because they're going to have to deal with him outside, and he is a hell of a player.
I think his game speaks for itself, but I tell him that, that is the craziest story I ever can remember about Brandon Cooks. I was at USC. He went to Oregon State, of course. And I get there, and we was playing Oregon State, and I'm like, man, glad we ain't got to play Brandon Cooks. Mind you, I didn't know who Brandon Cooks was. I wasn't really, I was a DB, didn't really follow SC football like that. And they kept saying Brandon Cooks. I'm like, man, this guy was tearing y'all up, like putting fear in him. Like, man, I'm glad we ain't got to see him. I'm like, dang, who was Brandon Cooks? So that was my first thought of Brandon Cooks. Like, oh, he must be fire. And then I see him. He always has 1,000 yards. The one time he didn't get 1,000 yards, he was hurt that year. I think he still got like 800 yards. So that goes to speak for itself, the type of talent he is, and having different quarterbacks going from the Saints to the Patriots to the Rams to go to Houston. You got 4, maybe, I don't know, different quarterbacks to play, to go against. and you still get 1,000 yards, that tells you a lot about you as a person, how you work hard, you treat the game right, and the game is going to treat you right, and just a tremendous athlete that he is. So I just tell those guys to stay with him. Don't take no plays off. I don't care if he's younger, older. If you're younger, he's older. Doesn't matter. Go out there and approach the game the same way you approach when you come out to practice and you want to dominate.
Just show him that 4.33 he ran at the NFL Combine, and that'll get their eyes open, I'm sure.
Yeah, but don't let Brandon Cooks get the run. That's one thing you don't want. You don't want no receiver in this league to get a full head of steam.
And when you're big and long like those two outside guys are, they can certainly do it. Final question. I find preparation for this stuff interesting. Similar offense they're running, but Kellen Moore's not there. New play caller, right, with Mike McCarthy. Have you guys looked at all and tried to figure out how maybe things might change with a different play caller, or are you just using the Cowboys tape from the last couple of years and trying to work off of that?
Yeah, it's always tricky in that aspect because you don't know. Obviously, you go to preseason, a lot of teams don't show everything, but at the same time, you want to know, what we talk about their bread and butter, which is Dak to CD. But now they have Gallup, who's a tremendous talent. You got not now that they have Gallup, Ben had him, but have Cooks now, another tremendous talent. And Pollard, so you know that they have a lot of weapons to go around. So, and the aspect when you think about it, you don't know what you may get, but at some point, those guys are going to be featured, and you just try to figure out what did they do well and just how to combat that.
Adoree, good stuff. Best luck against Dallas.
Appreciate it. Yes, sir.
That's Giants cornerback Adoree Jackson. Giant fans love a winner. It's why they love Citizens, named a 2022 Best Bank in the U.S. by The Banker as the official bank of the Giants and sponsor of the Huddle. Citizens is made ready for fans of Big Blue. Learn more at citizensbank.com.
You're ready for a change. Payday comes early with Citizens, so go to that retreat. New you moves to the country. Now you're raising goats and launching a lifestyle brand. Are you ready for all that life brings?
All right, now we're going to turn to Lance Medow, who had a chance to talk to Dallas Cowboys beat reporter for ESPN, Todd Archer.
The Giants and Cowboys kick off the 2023 regular season Sunday at MetLife Stadium. It's the first time they'll play each other in the opener since 2019 and the first time in East Rutherford, New Jersey since 2012. To help set the stage for this matchup, we're now joined by Cowboys ESPN NFL Nation reporter Todd Archer. Todd, you got Lance Medow here on Giants.com. Greatly appreciate the time. Hope all is well. How's everything on your end?
Yeah, all good. We're ready for this football season to finally start. It seems like it's been a while.
Absolutely. It's always the marathon of the offseason, so now we're all looking forward to some meaningful football. And Todd, let's start with one of the biggest changes for the Cowboys, at least on the surface, is the fact that Kellen Moore is no longer calling the plays. He's with the Chargers as the offensive coordinator, and Mike McCarthy now is going to take over play calling duties for the first time since 2018. And they also added Brian Schottenheimer to the staff. So how much do you think these changes alter the dynamics of what we're going to see out of the Cowboys offense this season?
I think what you see from the offense is really going to look pretty similar to what you've seen really since Dak has been the quarterback, right? I don't think there's going to be some new play that Mike McCarthy's going to show and we're going to be like, ooh, where'd that come from? I do think like things that will emphasize maybe their red zone packages and things like that, their pass protection, that'll be a little different that maybe like the naked eye won't pick up. But, Mike McCarthy is a proven play caller in this league. Obviously had a lot of success in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, with Brett Favre, had an offense that averaged 26 points a game, had a bunch of yards per game. But there's some pressure on him because the Cowboys offense has been really good statistically the last 4 years with Kellen Moore running things, top 5 in points and yards, third down, red zone, all that stuff. So if it doesn't reach those standards, then people are going to wonder why you made the change or why you felt you needed to make the change. So this adds just a little more to McCarthy's plate this year and in his fourth year with the Cowboys to show that he can be a true difference maker.
Speaking of the pressure that comes with him now taking on play calling duties, Todd, earlier this offseason, McCarthy in passing made comments that perhaps there'd be more of an emphasis on the run game. And I know when I heard that, I said to myself, well, Dak Prescott and 3-star wide receivers, hard to believe he's going to consistently take the ball out of the hands of his star quarterback. But do you think that was more to maybe justify why they moved away from Kellen Moore, or is there really nothing to read into those statements?
I think those comments got misconstrued a little bit because what he was talking about was how they played really in 2020, where they were checking it all over the place, even after Dak got hurt and didn't run the ball very well. Last year, they ran it 530 times. I'll be stunned if they run it 530 times this year into Mike McCarthy, because let's go to Mike McCarthy's track record in Green Bay. They weren't a run-heavy team at all.
Sure.
You know, they had success with the run, but they were a team that leaned on its pass. And he talked about before, you know, when you want to be a play caller, you don't think of what runs can lead to wins. You think of the pass plays that can lead to chunk plays and touchdowns and things like that. So I don't think you're going to see this become ground and pound or anything like that. Or, you know, to use the Giants, it's not going to be the 1990 Giants, right, where it was Otis Anderson running the ball and all that, right? This is going to be it'll be a balanced offense, but I don't think you're going to see the Cowboys morph into something that any different really percentage-wise than what they've been.
On a related note, in terms of the offensive philosophy, you go back to last season, everybody really around the league is emphasizing the fact that Dak Prescott led the NFL in interceptions with 15. And Todd, you watched every single snap. So if anybody can add context to this conversation, it would be you. I think you go back, you look at Dak's interceptions, about half of them were off of wide receivers' fingertips or off of their chest, including the pick six by the Jacksonville Jaguars that won the game. The reason I bring that up is not enough context being added to the dialogue as to Dak Prescott's turnover issues last season? Or when you go back, do you think there's some justification in terms of him needing to rethink where he's going with the football?
Every interception goes on the quarterback's record, fairly or not, right? Because every win goes on the quarterback's record, fairly or not. So, you know, Dak understands that and gets it. But I think, you know, that you mentioned context. We don't live in a society where we want context. We want the black and white, and, you know, Dak stinks and every pass he threw was picked off last year. But yeah, you mentioned a handful of them were off of receivers' hands or things like that. But there were a number of them though where he made poor decisions. And I can think of Chicago late in the first half. He tries to hit CeeDee Lamb down the middle of the field when he didn't need to, and he made it a game again. He brought the Bears back into it. Touchdown. He tried to force a ball down the middle at Green Bay on their second or third drive. That gets picked off in the end zone. Not a great route by the tight end or CeeDee Lamb on that one. But throw it in the stands and kick a field goal and go up 10-0. Then maybe that doesn't turn into an overtime loss. So I think there were times where he just made bad decisions based on the coverage and what he saw and time and score of games. And that's where that will need to improve. There will be a deflected pass that's going to go off a receiver's hand and get picked off. Every quarterback has those. I think he just needs to do a better job of controlling the ones where he's in charge of it with his decision making, with understanding the time and score better. And Mike McCarthy's history, sorry to ramble here, but Mike McCarthy's history suggests he will cut down significantly on the interceptions. You know, Aaron Rodgers, we all know he never threw an interception. So was that Mike or was that Rodgers? Give him some credit, I guess. But I'll point to Brett Favre. The year before Mike McCarthy came into the league, came to Green Bay, Brett led the NFL in interceptions that year. The next year, with Mike McCarthy in his first year, cut him down by about half. So there's something about McCarthy's scheme that allows quarterbacks to stay away from the interception.
That's a very good point. Plus, I would say Dak's track record shows that he's been fairly good in terms of the interception department. 15 was on the way high side in terms of his individual season highs. With respect to the targets that he's going to be working with, we know CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup are in the mix. The new arrival is obviously Brandon Cooks, who has really been a staple of 1,000 yards throughout his career. I look at him, Todd, as perhaps filling the void left behind 2 years ago by Amari Cooper, because he's such a good route runner. He's that polished veteran. How much do you think they're getting an Amari Cooper replacement essentially out of Brandon Cooks this season?
Yeah, I think you hit it. I mean, it gives him another target that really he didn't have last year. You know, Noah Brown was a good story as a former 6th, 7th round pick. he probably had more catches last year than he had if you add his Ohio State time and his Cowboys time together before last year. So Cooks gives these guys a speed threat. He turns 30. It seems like he's been in the league forever. It's going to be year 10, but he's only now turning 30. He can still run. And Dak talked about that in training camp, how every time he would watch the practice tape, there goes Cooks just flying by a guy. So that's an element that maybe even Cooper didn't bring to this team. He was a great route runner and was good after the catch, but maybe not just straight line speed. Brandon Cooks give him something that they don't have. And this allows Michael Gallup to be in that role he was when it was Lamb, Cooper, and him. This allows CeeDee Lamb maybe to get to see some different coverages as well. So I think you get Brandon Cooks for a 5th-round pick from Houston. That's a heck of a trade for the Cowboys.
We're talking with Todd Archer, Cowboys ESPN NFL Nation reporter, as we set the stage for the regular season opener between the Giants and Cowboys Sunday at MetLife Stadium. The other noticeable change in terms of personnel, Todd, is in the backfield. They've had a 1-2 punch between Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. They cut ties with Zeke. A little bit younger now behind Tony Pollard. Plus, he's coming off that leg ankle injury that he suffered in the playoff against the Niners. So a two-parter for you. A, how has Tony looked in terms of being back to full health for this opener? And B, how good do they feel about the depth behind him, considering there's not a lot of experience there?
Yeah, exactly. And on the first part of that with Pollard, he looks like he did before. It's easy to say that when you're just watching the training camp practice and not really tackling. He didn't play in the preseason. Health-wise, though, they say he's 100%. He said he was really 100% going back to about June. I asked him yesterday, hey, do you need to take a hit? And he goes, yeah, a hit really wouldn't be too bad. So, because it's been since January where he played in the game. But this is the first time in really his life, maybe go back to high school, where he's going to be the lead back. He had 193 carries last year, 1,007 yards, has been a big play threat really since he got here out of Memphis as a 4th-round pick. But this changes the dynamic a little bit. And it was a little bit like CeeDee Lamb a year ago, right? Like, can he be the number one with Amari Cooper gone? And he proved that he could be with Tony Pollard. Now CeeDee was a number one in high school, was a number one at Oklahoma, was one of the best guys coming out of the draft in 2020. With Pollard, as I mentioned, can he be a number one? The Cowboys believe he can. They put the franchise tag on him, and he's shown that he can handle or be a big play contributor. But how much more than 193 carries can he get? And that gets you to the second part of the question you asked, is that depth? And it's untested. Right now it's going to be Rico Dowdle as their number 2 back. I think he has 7 carries in the last 3 years or something like that. And then Deuce Vaughn, a 6th-round pick. There's some big question marks here. They like both of those guys, but they've rolled with that 2-headed monster with Elliott and Pollard the last few years. And even if it wasn't so much split in 2019, 2020 between the two, they still knew Tony could do the job. With these two guys, you really don't know. So I think it's going to be a feeling out process maybe early in the season. And that's going back to what we talked about earlier. That's why I find it hard to believe that they're going to run it more than 531 times when they don't have that known complementary back the way they did with Elliott and Pollard.
Yeah, you need the personnel to deliver on that end. And, of course, the running backs go hand in hand with the offensive line. And the Cowboys have continuity and decent health coming into the season, especially with Tyron Smith ready to go at left tackle. However, the million-dollar question is Tyler Smith, their rookie, who had a really good campaign last year, all of a sudden coming down with a hamstring injury. So as we record this here on this Thursday leading up to the Sunday game, Todd, where would you assess Tyler's status going in? And in the event that he can't go, who would be the next man up here?
Chuma Edoga, I think, would be the guy that they would start. Not because he might be the best guy, but at least he has experience. He played for the Jets for the last few years. TJ Bass is an undrafted free agent out of Oregon. While they like his potential and he showed some good things in the preseason, I don't know if throwing him out there right away, the first game of this guy's career against those defensive tackles would make the most sense. I think I wish I could. I haven't talked to anybody yet after practice. Tyler Smith did not practice on Thursday. I think there's some optimism that he'll be able to get out there. the Cowboys have a different practice schedule than a lot of teams where they don't practice on Friday and they do a more of a combination practice of what a normal Friday is on Saturday as a ramp up to the game. We'll know more by Saturday. Yesterday, I didn't think he was going to play in the game, but today I'm starting to think that there's a chance, just based on what we saw in his rehab work off to the side today. He looked like he was a guy that was better, but as McCarthy's pointed out, he's never had this injury before, and the return to play on a guy like that is a little different when you don't have that history of knowing how he will deal with it like you would a veteran. So the timing of it couldn't have been worse for the Cowboys to have this question at left guard, because, as you mentioned, you want to have that continuity up front, and they would have had at least some of that going into the opener. If they don't, then it's a mix and match that they've really had the entire time McCarthy's been the coach.
Well, they definitely have continuity, Todd, on the defensive side of the ball as we flip the script. Dan Quinn stays on. I've said this throughout the offseason. I think maybe one of the most valuable transactions for the Cowboys this offseason was the fact that they didn't lose him to a head coaching gig, because they've led the NFL in takeaways each of the last 2 seasons, and we know how effective the pass rush has been. I guess from a big picture perspective, given how consistent this group has been, how much more can Dan Quinn get out of this unit in terms of elevating them to new heights this season, in your mind?
I think that's what they're banking on, that they will be better than they were a year ago. And, the first, 6 of the first 7 games that they didn't allow more than 20 points in the game. But, they've allowed too many big plays. And Dan Quinn will be the first one to tell you that. So that's something that they really need to monitor. They have to go from, they were 6th in league in scoring defense last year. That needs to improve. Their yardage rank was 22nd or 13th in the league. That needs to improve, and it can, because now they have the core of these guys, maybe save 1 or 2, are going into their 3rd year with Dan Quinn as a coordinator. He knows them, they know him, and they can do some more things maybe that they haven't been able to do the first 2 years. I think the biggest acquisition, maybe that I talked about Cooks on offense, is Stephon Gilmore, getting him from Indianapolis.
Yeah.
That gives the Cowboys a legit cornerback opposite Trayvon Diggs, that if you want to test him, go right ahead. This is the defensive player of the year in 2019, a guy who can still move really well as a 30-plus-year-old corner. Opposite Diggs, a guy with 17 picks in his first 3 seasons, gives the Cowboys a lot of options to what they can do at their pass rush and how they can match up at other positions.
Todd, you brought up giving up too many explosive plays. The other item I think that jumps off the page from last season for not good reasons is issues in terms of stopping the run, and that clearly is important based on the personnel in the division. They bring in Mozzie Smith, first-round pick, defensive tackle, and then they acquired Jonathan Hankins midway through last season, the former Giant, but he'll now have an entire offseason with the team. Those 2 in particular, how much do you think they bolster the Cowboys' ability to help stop the run?
They better, or it's going to be the same old. And a big part of, the run defense struggled a little bit at the end of last year was when Van Der Esch was out. He's the guy who gets them all in the correct spots, especially the defensive line, to make sure in the right gaps and things like that. They really missed him at the end of last year, and that's where they had some issues with their run defense. But it really was an issue all year long. They need those 2 big guys, Hankins, obviously the former Giant, and Mozzie Smith, their first-round pick, to clog it up in the middle. It's been a little bit of a slow start for Smith during training camp and in the preseason games, but he's a strong guy. He's just kind of trying to figure it all out here at this point. So I think, the Cowboys are still going to be – and the Cowboys know that they're going to be tested on their run defense, because McCarthy said, what we do best is rush the passer. What's the best way to combat that? You run at us. So they know it's coming. And obviously they know with Saquon it's coming. They've had success with Saquon, in his career. Maybe not with all these guys playing defense, but I think he's got 200-yard games against the Cowboys and maybe 4 with less than 30, or some stupid stat, which doesn't make any sense, because I've never really viewed the Cowboys' run defense as so potent that they could slow a guy like Barkley down. But the numbers have been pretty favorable to Dallas on that one. But if they're going to be, where were they last year? Let me look it up. 22nd against the run last year. That has to get to 12, I guess, to make a significant jump, and that's why they drafted Mozzie Smith. they need him to be a big part of this defense.
Yeah, especially with guys like Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, and even Dorrance Armstrong consistently getting after the quarterback. You need guys to help solidify the other facets. And that brings me back to the pass rush, Todd, because we talk so much about Parsons and Lawrence. I actually think a guy who gets hidden as a result, overshadowed, however you want to word it, is Dorrance Armstrong. People probably don't even realize 8.5 sacks last season, was second on the team, ahead of DeMarcus Lawrence.
Yeah.
How much do you think he's sort of the secret weapon in the pass rush based on how Dan Quinn has utilized him?
Yeah, and he's a guy that they can move around and do different things with. And that's really all three of those guys, Armstrong, DeMarcus Lawrence, and Parsons, can move in all these different spots to make it hard for offensive line to say, okay, which guys come in, where are they coming from? Are they going to be next to each other coming? Do we got to slide which way? How do we get all this configured? But the strength of the Cowboys team is their pass rush. Dante Fowler is a guy 4 years ago would have been the Cowboys' best pass rusher. Now he's playing 30 snaps a game, maybe even not that much. And he's a guy who had, I believe, 5 sacks last year. Sam Williams, a second-round pick, battling a toe injury right now. I don't know how much he'll be able to play on Sunday, but is a guy that the Cowboys believe can get after the passer. So, they have it's not just like back in the day when the Cowboys, it was DeMarcus Ware. That was the guy that was going to get you 15, 16 sacks. They got a bunch of guys that can get after the quarterback, and that's what makes them so good. And that's why, does a pass rush make a secondary? Does a secondary make a pass rush? The Cowboys kind of have both. And when you look at the names and the talent, that both can help each other. And if you have Diggs and Gilmore, that should give Parsons and those guys more time to get to the quarterback. If you have Parsons, Lawrence, and Armstrong and Williams and Fowler and all these guys, well, that's going to help the other guys on the outside not have to cover as long and maybe jump some routes. So they're in a good spot defensively as they enter their third year at Dan Quinn.
We're talking with Todd Archer, covers the Cowboys for ESPN, their NFL Nation reporter. With respect to Parsons, Todd, the other storyline that came up this offseason was all these whispers about him moving positions, even though I would argue Dan Quinn has moved him around pretty much ever since he was drafted by the Cowboys. What do you make of where he's labeled and whether or not that's even going to make a difference in the big picture of things this season?
Yeah, they still call him a linebacker. He's an edge player. That doesn't sound as good, but he's. If I'm sure every team in the league would love to have him drop in coverage and not rush the passer. So, but like you said, he can line up in the A gap. He can line up to the left. He can line up to the right. He can drop in coverage and do a good job against tight ends and backs. But where he's going to become my guess is he will be the highest paid NFL defensive player in history next year if the Cowboys want to get that contract done as soon as 2024, is because of how he affects the quarterback and disrupts the game plan and things like that. So he'll be all over how do I say this the right way? He's still going to be listed as a linebacker, but he's really an edge. It's not, I think it's probably a semantics game. They'll move him around and keep people guessing, but he's going to be going forward at that quarterback.
Yeah, I think semantics is a very appropriate term to discuss that element of this storyline entering the Cowboys-Giants game. We talked about injuries on offense. You had mentioned Sam Williams' injury that he's dealing with and perhaps could be limited or may not even play on Sunday. The other player of note is safety Donovan Wilson dealing with a calf injury. Now, Dallas also has Jaron Kearse, who has been very productive for them. So how do you assess Wilson's availability, perhaps? And if he's not available, how much having Kearse on the back end helps soften that blow?
Well, really, the Cowboys' base defense is a 3-safety look with Kearse, Donovan Wilson, and Malik Hooker. So if you take him out of the mix, here's a guy, I think he had 5 sacks last year as well. He's a guy who pretty much hit every defensive statistical category, and the Cowboys signed him to a pretty decent extension here in this offseason. I'd be surprised if he were to play. Hasn't practiced since the opener of training camp because of that calf injury. He has experience. He's a veteran. He knows what he's doing. I think the Cowboys take a big picture view of it's an 18-week, 17-game season. He's not really practiced that much. let's be smart about it, even on a division game to open the year. And then from there, you look at guys they like, Marquise Bell, kind of listed as a linebacker hybrid guy a little bit. And then Wanye Thomas, undrafted free agent from a couple years ago, has really done some good things. But it kind of takes one of the elements of the Cowboys defense, what makes them so strong with their three safeties and how they can match up at tight end, how they can still help in the run game. He would be a loss for the Cowboys if he can't go on Sunday.
Todd, before I let you go, I guess we should get to the item that perhaps is the elephant in the room. It wouldn't be appropriate if we didn't talk the Cowboys without the kicking game coming up, given what unfortunately transpired with Brett Maher last season in the playoffs. So they have a competition, and Brandon Aubrey, former soccer player who kicked in the USFL, winds up winning the role. And the numbers in the preseason, solid, 2 of 3 from field goals, 8 of 9 of extra points. How did he look from your optics, and where does Mike McCarthy feel confidence-wise he has this young guy as he takes over what could obviously be an extremely critical role throughout the stretch of this season?
Yeah, he talked to us here on Thursday about that and said Aubrey reminds him of a young Mason Crosby, who Mike had for years up in Green Bay. And in Crosby's first preseason, nailed a game-winning kick from 50-plus at the end of a preseason game or maybe early in the year and really used that to jumpstart his career. And Mike thinks Aubrey's got similar leg strength, kicked a 59-yarder in the last preseason game against the Raiders. And I don't want to say made it with ease, but certainly looked comfortable going out there and making the attempt. But there's still a wait-and-see approach because, Mason Crosby was a successful kicker in college at Colorado, a guy that a lot of people knew of coming into the draft. Brandon Aubrey, as you mentioned, was a soccer player at Notre Dame. Has only been kicking a football for the last 2.5, 3 years. So there is some questioning. The Cowboys do have confidence in him, though. But it is, the way it ended with Maher last year wasn't good, but it was really only an extra points. I think he made his last 12 field goal tries of the season, including the playoffs. It was the extra points that gave him fits. So the Cowboys rolling in with a young kicker. They've done that before. In my tenure, I'm thinking of guys like Dan Bailey, undrafted kid out of Oklahoma State, who ended up being one of the most accurate kickers of all time until he left here. So they'll have confidence in him. I'm curious to see if it's the first drive and it's 4th and 2 from the Giants, say 35. Does McCarthy go for the field goal, or does he go for the first down and see if he can and get a little closer or get a touchdown on a drive? That's going to be interesting to see how that impacts the play calling.
Yeah, you bring up a great point because that obviously is another dynamic that will influence what McCarthy wants to do in terms of his level of aggressiveness or maybe getting the young kicker's feet wet early on in a divisional game right out of the gates. Well, it's the Cowboys and the Giants. They renew their rivalry week 1 of the 2023 regular season coming up this Sunday. He is Todd Archer, Cowboys ESPN NFL Nation reporter. Todd, always good to catch up with you. Greatly appreciate the time and the insight, and we look forward to Sunday's game. Thanks for joining me.
You got it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
We thank Todd Archer and Lance Medow for helping us out, getting an inside look at the Dallas Cowboys. The Giants Huddle is brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. From game day to every day, Citizens is made ready for Giant fans with insights, guidance, and solutions. Learn more at citizensbank.com.
You love turf. You're good at it. So you start a turf biz. Business grows, your savings grow. Become the most celebrated name in turf. Are you ready for all that life brings?
Now, let's go to the voice of the Giants, Bob Papa. He had a chance to talk to the head coach of the New York Football Giants, Brian Daboll, on the eve of this 2023 season.
Season kicks off. Giants taking on the Dallas Cowboys, and as always, we're joined by the head coach of the New York Football Giants, Brian Daboll. And, Coach, I know there's a lot of work that has gone into the lead-up to this opening day. Just sort of reflect upon how this offseason has been for you heading into this game and the continuity of bringing your staff back from last year for the most part and this year number 2 with Joe kind of running things with the upstairs part of it and just how it's all kind of come together as we get ready to kick off season number 2 with Coach Daboll.
Yeah, we understand that every year is a new year. It's, pretty consistent with a normal offseason once you've been at a place for a year. You go through, self-evaluation, scheme evaluation, the combine and free agency and the draft and then OTAs. And, training camp ultimately and preseason games. So it's it's a pretty normal flow. Obviously, most of the people in the building have been here for a year, so I think there's a little familiarity with that. But we added some players that we think can help us, and now it's about coming together and playing well this opening game.
As you were getting ready to sort of, in your mindset with Joe, think about what you wanted this team to look like going into 2023, at least from the outsider, it looks like one of the key components, along with bringing in good football players, was to increase team speed. Was that a focus or just a byproduct of players that wound up coming here?
Well, I don't think that's anything new to adding pieces to a team in the NFL. You're always trying to improve, whether it's your size or your speed or your talent. But again, it's one thing about collecting talent, and it's another thing about building a team. And we've went through a tough training camp and some preseason games, but ultimately it's how you respond in the regular season games when things get tough and you face adversity. And we've yet to play one yet, so the guys are working hard. They've prepared well for this game, and it'll be a good test for us.
You mentioned adversity, Coach. I was thinking about what the atmosphere is going to be like when you guys take the field and the fans in there, blew out, and the Cowboys and primetime and all that other stuff. And then I think about your quarterback and sort of this even keel sort of mindset that he brings to things. And we saw that last year, even though you guys didn't win on Christmas Eve. It was pretty loud in Minnesota. And then you go there and you win a road playoff game. How does Daniel Jones' personality best serve this team?
Yeah, I think what's important for us, Bob, is that each person on our team, they each have their own personality, and I want their personalities to show. And if you're, have a calm demeanor like Daniel does, then have a calm demeanor. Whatever allows you to be at your best. If you're very excitable, then be excitable. Let's not try to be something that we're not. He's been a good leader for us since I've walked into that building the first day. He's worked really hard this week to get ready to go out there and play a good game.
Coach, how about the excitement level as far as now with him being in year 2 within the system, with Coach Kafka, yourself, and the rest of the offensive staff, where, you're able to sort of kind of understand each other in a certain way that last year was more of a learning process as you go into games like this?
Yeah, I think that relationship is very important between, in this case, the head coach and the quarterback, and also the play caller and the quarterback. The quarterback touches the ball on every play. He has decisions to make on every play. And I think the more familiar and comfortable he is with the system that we're running, the better he can play and the freer he can play. So I have a lot of confidence in Daniel. He's an extremely hard worker, and he's worked really hard this week to get ready to go out there and play a good game.
I want to ask you about one more player before I get on to the Cowboys here. Darren Waller, who you brought in via trade, has been outstanding when we saw him in game action, and I know he's been very impressive as far as the workroom is concerned, whether it's meetings, the weight room, or on the football field practicing. Could you just sort of share with the audience some of the things that make him a unique player?
Well, he's got size, he's got speed, he's got quickness, good hands, athletic, and he's smart. So those are all good qualities to have at any position, but particularly his, with his intelligence that, he's played a lot of different spots throughout his career, and, he's done a good job acclimating himself to our program.
Coach, I know last season for your football team, stopping the run is always a priority, but you guys have made some steps to sort of bolster that. Last year, I think between Pollard and Elliott, they had a combined 62 carries for about 330 yards rushing. Does it kind of get back to the same thing as you get ready to play this game tonight? You have to be able to control the run to keep the game dictated on your terms? Yeah,
I'd say first down is a critical down, whether they just choose to run it or throw it, how they run it, whether it's perimeter runs, toss cracks, jet sweeps. They have a very good offensive line that can block a number of running plays well, and they have a very talented runner in Pollard who can make you miss. He can take it the distance. He can bounce it. He can cut back. So, running to the ball, controlling the line of scrimmage, tackling well will all be key aspects to the game.
And then you have Dak Prescott, who has been outstanding since he's been in the league. I know a lot of people are talking about the interceptions from last season, but if you take a look at what the Cowboys did offensively down the stretch, it was pretty impressive. They averaged 33 points a game over the last part of the season. What makes Dak such a difficult player to defend?
He's a very smart quarterback. He can throw the ball in any spot you need him to throw it. He makes good decisions.
And that's why he wins a lot of football games, right?
Yeah, scores a lot of points.
Brandon Cooks is a new addition to this football team. What kind of matchup stress does he put on a defense?
Yeah, he stresses you vertically. He can run routes too. He's played this game a long time at numerous spots and been very productive wherever he's been. I have a tremendous amount of respect for him as a man and also a player. But he can take the top off. He can hit you vertical. He can work the intermediate. He can catch and run. He's a complete receiver.
Dan Quinn's been in the league a long time as a head coach and the Cowboys defensive coordinator. And, as you look at them defensively, as you get ready to play them tonight, Coach, obviously they create a lot of issues for you as far as getting pressure on the quarterback with their front, and then they're ball hawks. They've led the NFL in takeaways each of the last 2 years. Obviously you're not going to give us the game plan here, but as you look at them, what are the strengths that you see with this football team and things that they do really well defensively?
Well, their strength is their players. They have a lot of good players at numerous spots. They're extremely fast. They create negative plays, and they take the ball away. So when you play against a defense that has tremendous speed, that can create negative plays, whether that's in the run or the pass game, and that takes the ball away, those defenses are usually going to be at the top of the league.
And final question, Coach, as we get ready for this game. There's a lot of hype. It's a primetime game. It's the opening game of the season, so every player in the league feels it. But the way the rules are in today's NFL, it's not like the old days where guys played a ton in the preseason. And we saw a little bit of it in the Thursday night game with the Lions and Chiefs. How do you, as a head coach, manage the adrenaline to make sure that your guys have staying power for the full 60 minutes of football?
Yeah, I think you do that throughout training camp. And then once the regular season hits, you set the standard and the expectations and the keys for the game, and you teach them during the week. And, my approach is, less is more towards the end of the week. So, everybody's excited to play this game. They've worked extremely hard. Opening day in the NFL is an awesome day. It's a great game to be part of. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of adrenaline, like you said, and those guys, I just need those guys to be themselves. So everybody gets ready for games differently. But, today's a day for the players. It's less about, the coaches and what you say, because, they've spent a long time, starting in OTAs all the way through now to get to this point. And I'm sure, there'll be a lot of excitement. But, the key is to stay focused on doing your job well and focus on playing the next play, and understand there'll be plenty of diversity that we go through, and just keep on going.
Coach, we appreciate a couple minutes. Best of luck, and we look forward to doing this throughout the course of the season.
Thanks, Bob.
We thank Giants cornerback Adoree Jackson. We thank Todd Archer from ESPN. And we thank the head coach of the Giants, Brian Daboll, and Bob Papa, of course, for joining us on the Giants Huddle podcast. Thank you for being with us. It was all brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. Make sure you tune in to our pregame show at 6:20 on WFAN on Sunday, 2 hours before the game. You'll hear snippets of some of these interviews and a lot more as Jonathan Casillas talk to you for 2 hours. Take your calls on the phone as well to get ready for Giants football. Thank you so much for being with us, everybody. We'll see you next time on the Giants Huddle podcast.